I've got it. Okay, can everybody hear all right? Excellent, good stuff. So look, we'll begin, and we will see how we go with the technology. So look, welcome, obviously, everyone, and thanks for coming along to the Macquarie Electorate Meet the Federal Candidates 2022 Community Run Forum, which is a bit of a long sentence, but there we are. So look, what we'll do first of all is acknowledgement of country. So I'll just sort of read that. I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge on behalf of the Hawkesbury community, the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So look, just a quick sort of introduction. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Tony Bosworth. I'm editor of Hawkesbury Post and I'm the moderator for this forum. And the forum's organised by a bunch of community groups. Each one of those has put a question up which candidates have had, and they'll give us their sort of feedback on that. If you are logged in to Zoom as a watcher, if you like, a guest, you can actually ask questions. You can put those in, but please do keep those really tight, not long rambling questions. So try and keep them pretty tight. Okay, that's good. Now, code of conduct, we've got obviously a code of conduct for a safe and inclusive experience for all. It should come up here soon on a slide. And we expect everybody, obviously, look at standard stuff to adhere to that code of conduct. And it can be found at the website. There you go. You can find it at the Hawkesbury Macquarie Facebook link there. Okay, that's good. Now, basically then what we've got for anybody watching and of course for the candidates. So we've got 6 candidates today. There are actually 8 running in Macquarie for the House of Representatives. We've got 6 here today, which is good. Nicole Evans, who's for the United Australia Party, she wasn't able to attend, but she has answered the questions that have been put to her. So we've got one of our colleagues here is going to read out the answers to her particular question there. So what we'll do now, the candidates are going to introduce themselves, and if they could take 30 seconds each, which is not a lot of time, but if you can keep it to that, that'd be brilliant, and then we'll get into some questions. So we'll just go through the list. We've got Susan Templeman, who's the current MP and is the Labour candidate. So Susan, if you could give us a bit of an introduction, that'd be brilliant.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks to all the groups involved in hosting this. I think it's terrific that we're being brought together here. Can I also acknowledge that we're on the lands of the Darug and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Look, I started off as a small businesswoman and before that a journalist with no intention of ever going into politics. But the last 6 years has been a real privilege. I think most people know the key issues that I've fought for 12 years, in fact. Mental health, getting better mental health services, particularly for young people, infrastructure and better disaster preparation and response. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion tonight. Excellent, thanks for that.
And Tony Pettit, Tony's with One Nation. So if you could give us your 30 seconds, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here. Look, guys, I left school as a tradie, did a diesel mechanic. I worked in transport. I did 10 years in state public service. I had a certificate and an associate diploma in mechanical engineering. I understand how things work. I know the nuts and bolts of everything. I've been involved in this political stuff and been interested in it for probably 40 years. Why am I doing that? Because I'm not happy with the majors. I've seen this country go down the gurgler. I've seen the manufacturing and industry being destroyed. Our farming, our exports are going all over the world, and the Australian people are getting virtually nothing for that. And I think if we're not getting anything for it, leave it in the ground. And also our agriculture. We need to evaluate, add all these exports, including agricultural and mineral resources, and get some money back into the people. And if we had that, we wouldn't even have to pay income tax.
Excellent. All right, that's great. Thanks, Tony. And our third candidate here is Sarah Richards, who's standing for the Liberal Party. So, Sarah, if you could give us your 30 seconds, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And thank you everyone for hosting this forum and for the members of the community who are viewing tonight. I appreciate it greatly. It's always a good opportunity to be able to speak to the community in these kinds of forums. So yes, Sarah Richards, Liberal candidate for Macquarie, was also the candidate in 2019, where I just missed out by a whisker, 371 votes being the difference there. So since that result, I've spent the last 3 years showing the community, well, half the community wanted me to be their MP. So I've been showing the community that despite not being elected at that time, I'm still able to deliver. And my advocacy has been proven through the delivery of funds for the third crossing of the Hawkesbury River, headspace in Katoomba, a future headspace in the Hawkesbury, and a whole range of other things. I've also been a councillor for the last 5.5 years on Hawkesbury City Council, and try not to call myself a politician, but use politics as a vehicle to deliver for the community that I've lived in for about 3 decades. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That's great. So Greg, I must ask you, how do you pronounce your surname? My apologies for that.
No, that's all right, Tony. Keatley.
Keatley, excellent. So, Greg's from the Animal Justice Party. So, yeah, if you could give us your 30 seconds, Greg, that'd be brilliant.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for the invitation to come tonight. I'd also like to pay respect to the Darug people, past, present and emerging. I'm standing for the Animal Justice Party second time in the federal election. I'm a full-time wildlife care and rehabilitator now. I manage my own conservation property west of the Dividing Range, just off the escarpment of the Blue Mountains, and animals and the environment are now my life. Through the last 20 years of wildlife rescue and care and fighting for the environment in the Sydney Basin and the Blue Mountains, Hawkesbury area, I found it necessary to do something for the planet myself. So I'm pretty much got boots on the ground doing this sort of stuff every day, which is a great realisation of how lucky, fortunate we are to live in Australia.
That's good. Thanks for that. Now, Nicole Evans, do we actually have 30 seconds? Okay, we don't have a 30-second intro from Nicole, but we'll get on to her answers to some of the questions. So Tony Hickey of the Greens, if you could give us your 30 seconds, that'd be great.
Thanks, Tony. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're all meeting on Aboriginal land and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Tony Hickey. I'm your Greens candidate for Macquarie. I'm a teacher. I've lived in Katoomba for 6 years now and love living in Katoomba, but I also have a connection to the Hawkesbury part of the electorate. I used to teach at Hawkesbury High many years ago and lived on beautiful Bowen Mountain. So it was a long time ago, but I know the area pretty well.
That's good. Thanks for that. Brilliant. Okay, look, what we'll do then is move on to question 1. Now, this one is from one of the community groups, Sick of North Richmond Traffic Snarls. And their question is, how do you plan to ensure a thorough, transparent and community engaged flood-free third river crossing project? So, Tony Pettit, if you could give us your views on that first, that'd be good.
Look, I think there's a great lack of transparency by government, more and more and more. The government keep telling us what they're going to do. Well, let's get it right. They're there to do what we want them to do. They're supposed to represent us and act in our best interest. The so-called flood-free bridge at Windsor Well has failed 4 times so far, another failure for the government. Not only did they put the bridge in the wrong place, it doesn't effectively do anything at all as far as floods are concerned. So, yeah, we need more transparency from government, and I'd make sure that that would happen, and we'd get a feed from the general people in the area to the government what we want, not what they want shoved down our throats.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. Sarah, if you could give us your take on it.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I'm really pleased that we're starting off with this as the first question, because whether I'm elected or not at this election, I will always be very proud of the fact that my advocacy has left a legacy for this area, and that amounts now to a $500 million investment in a very vital piece of infrastructure. And it's not just a third crossing, it's a road network that goes from North Richmond to, of course, the Driftway. $400 million of that is federal funding. And $100 million of that is, of course, state funding. Now, the community has been engaged extensively on this project. As you know, when the federal government funds something, especially an infrastructure piece like this, it then goes to the state government to design the route. I've had no say in that route whatsoever, and that has come out as a preferred route. That still hasn't been decided as the final route by the state government. However, it's important to remember the fundamental brief for this bridge was to solve a traffic congestion problem. And as someone who has lived in or had lived in North Richmond for the last few years, certainly stuck in that same bottleneck of traffic. And we need to solve that, and we need to get on with doing the job. And I believe that it's only with the re-election of the coalition government that we can get on with doing that. And it's only with the coalition government over the last few years being able to run and look after the economy that the funds are available for that. And so, as I said, I'll be forever proud to be associated with delivering those funds. Thank you.
You're on mute there, Tony.
Sorry about that. So, Greg, yeah, look, could you give us your take on that then? So, how would you plan to ensure a thorough, transparent and community-engaged flood-free, this is hard to say, flood-free third river crossing project?
Well, Tony, it seems to me that if we have learned anything from the Windsor Bridge fiasco, we should trust local knowledge. There was enormous opposition to the demolition of the old bridge and the building of the new one, yet it happened. There have been suggestions that there could have been other interests, like a sand mining project, affecting the outcome. And I would certainly want to ensure any such project was judged on its merits alone. Locals warned the new bridge would still go under water in a flood, and in recent floods it did just that. Not once, but twice. It was a $137 million cost to the public purse that could have been avoided. It is not only the bridges themselves that must be flood-proof, of course. Many of the roads that lead to the bridge are underwater. It matters little how high the bridges are. And we know that many of the roads in the area were submerged during the recent flooding. So in short, there are no quick fixes. We need an extensive and inclusive community consultation process as a first step, and not one in which a government department tells residents what they are planning to do and then calls that consultation.
Okay, thank you for that. That's good. Now, we should have a reply here from Nicole Evans then. As I say, we'll get one of our colleagues to read that out.
Thanks, Tony. I live west of the river, and being flooded in has personally affected me 4 times in the past 3 years. I would like to see something similar to the Jim Anderson Bridge in North Richmond or Richmond. I will engage in direct and swift consultation with the stakeholders affected, as well as engagement with the state and local councils. I will ensure that the voices of the people in the area are heard by giving them multiple opportunities to communicate their concerns and ideas. This will be relayed transparently to all levels of government as a matter of urgency, so that a flood-free river crossing can begin construction as soon as possible over a route that disrupts the least amount of people possible.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's good. So that's working all right. You see that system. That's good. And so Tony Hickey, if you could give us your views on the bridge situation, that'd be brilliant.
Thanks, Tony. I think we need to go back a few steps. Transport for New South Wales consulted with a small group, and then but they seem to have fixed on this on the green route, which looks like it does everything. Looks like it's really good, but it actually does nothing for flood immunity or to fix the traffic. The local community are the people who understand what they actually need here, and they deserve to be consulted, not just given a final plan and told to deal with that. For example, this focus on the green route, which cuts a few seconds off travel time, is not really going to do much good when people are going to end up joining a queue on Bell's Line of road further up, and they're getting into that slow crawl a minute earlier than they would have otherwise. we hear a lot about the effect on Red Bank, but what about people on Southie Road and Pex Road? They're not, they seem to be getting all the negatives of this plan and none of the benefits. And these people were not consulted in the planning so far. So we need to go back and do a lot more in the planning stage. We also need to think about public transport in the Hawkesbury. If we had better public transport, there wouldn't need to be so many people driving on the roads. And there are people in the Hawkesbury who do not have a car, and they definitely need public transport. And it'd be good if public transport didn't have to deal with the traffic congestion as well. So this plan is broken. We have hundreds of millions of dollars, so we can afford to get it right. Let's start with some well-facilitated neighbourhood forums and some clearly articulated objectives and some listening, and go from there.
Thanks for that. That's great. And Susan Templeman, could you give us your take on it?
Yes, and I just want to apologise if noise starts. They're doing renovations in my building and you'll hear banging, and all of a sudden while Tony was talking there was drilling. So I'm hoping I'll get through the next minute. Look, I think we have to manage expectations around this idea of a flood-free bridge. And to be very clear, it's not a third crossing, it's a duplication. It isn't appropriate for a federal member to be pushing any particular route because it will be a decision of the state government. But what I think is appropriate is that a federal member, where there is $400 million of federal funding committed to a project, receives adequate briefings from a state government. And that is something that hasn't happened. There's been a refusal of the state government to engage with me in any way on this particular project. They'll talk to me about every other project in the Hawkesbury, but not on this one. So I think that's part of transparency, and that seems to be lacking. I'd also take issue with the idea that there's been adequate consultation. Any of us who were involved in that know that because of COVID, there was one public session which was overrun with people, and there was not sufficient time or space to engage about the issues. There were then things done online because of COVID. So I think we've got a perfect opportunity, particularly if there is a change of government, and there may not be, to really shine a light on the transparency and accountability of it. Now, the last thing I'd say is that it is a huge amount of money. It, of course, is money not just for the bridge, but as we've been told, for the Driftway, and that's a road that should be upgraded. But to build a bridge, after going through what we've been through without considering how it might be able to increase capacity for people to cross when floodwaters are rising, would be a terrible waste of time and money. And so that should absolutely be seriously considered, and Labor will be speaking to the state government if we have the opportunity about how that is worked into the project.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. Excellent. Next question here. This is a contentious one often in our area. What are your views about raising the dam wall? So that's Warragamba Dam, and why? So Sarah, if we could, I should say, this is from Bell's Line of Road Community Action Group. It's their question. So Sarah, if you could kick that one off, that'd be really great.
Thank you, Tony. I'm not sure on all of the candidates' positions on this one, but I think I am possibly the only candidate out of the 8 who supports the raising of the Warragamba Dam wall. And I've been on the public record, I think since my election as a councillor, very vocally about that, and I haven't stepped away from that. Through the floods that our community has been through recently, I've also stepped that advocacy up quite a fair bit. I, at one point in time, lived in a house in Windsor on the riverbank, so very acutely aware of the river rising, and it is government's responsibility to look at all possible mitigating factors to have that flood level decreased. Now, Infrastructure New South Wales did a report on the flood from last year, and it found, had that dam wall been raised by 14 metres, the flood level would have been over 3 metres, I think it's 3.4, but around 3 metres less. Now, that 3 metres actually equates to hundreds of homes. So that's people whose lives aren't affected by inundation of flood water. So I have always and will always be an advocate for the raising of the Warragamba Dam wall. Through the flood process and talking to so many members of our community, they have begged me, I mean literally begged me in the Hawkesbury, for those who live on the floodplain or are affected, for those who are cut off by floods, to continue to advocate for this project. And I will continue to look them in the eye and tell them that I will continue to support their needs and this community in getting that dam wall raised.
Yeah, thank you, that's good. Greg, what's your take on it?
Thanks, Tony. I'm most strongly opposed to the raising of the Warragamba Dam wall because it would be a very expensive exercise, causing an environmental and First Nations cultural disaster that won't solve the problem of flooding downstream. In fact, it will open the way for more development on the floodplain, inhibiting the natural drainage of water and create even a greater risk to human life. Environmental scientist Professor Jamie Pittock has calculated that no configuration of the Warragamba Dam will prevent flooding in the Hawkesbury and Nepean Valley because an estimated 45% of floodwaters originate from catchment areas that are not upstream of the Warragamba Dam. So moderate to major flooding of Richmond in the lower Hawkesbury can occur from the Gross River alone. Also, he noted that flood mitigation dams tend to control only small to medium-sized floods from upstream catchments. But during large floods, operators have no choice but to spill the water from the dam, and at that point, flooding can occur. So a raised wall, in my opinion, would not have prevented recent flooding.
Okay, thank you. That's good, thank you. And so we should have a reply here from Nicole Evans from United Australia Party now. Just get that in a second. Here we go.
I don't believe that raising the dam wall will provide a long-term flood mitigation solution, merely a band-aid fix. The dam was not engineered to be raised twice, and doing so not only risks flooding the Hawkesbury in the event of wall failure, but the entire Sydney Basin. Warragamba Dam holds 2 million gigalitres of water at capacity, and there are 5 dams that flow into the Hawkesbury River. Initial flood mitigation would require that the dams are released prior to a rain event and not during the rain event, as we have seen multiple times recently. Further, I believe that more consultation with the Indigenous community, as well as the towns surrounding Warragamba, is required. There was talk of damming Colo River as a flood mitigation option, which could potentially offer relief to the people of the Hawkesbury. However, this is something I would need to investigate further. Thank you.
Thank you, that's great. Thanks very much for that. And Tony Hickey for the Greens, what's your take on it?
It's a terrible idea. It's basically an admission from the state government that they have overdeveloped a known floodplain and it's really bad damage control. It's not going to prevent floods. The floodplain is fed by multiple rivers and creeks. As people have said, in major rain events, the dam wall, no matter how high it is, was going to be next to useless, and especially in the double peak events that we've just had, like the one we've just had. The plan actually seems to be about putting more concrete and more buildings on the floodplain, the contributing areas, and that's just going to put more people at risk and make the flood damage even worse. The downstream impacts in the Hawkesbury are huge. That it'll mean longer inundation, more riverbank erosion, destruction of the ecosystems. Last week, I visited some families in Windsor who were flooded twice this year, and they still haven't even moved it back into their places properly yet. A raised dam wall for them would mean a metre of water sitting in their kitchen for up to a month. That will cause irreversible damage to their houses, and it's like putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. So just for the benefit of a few property developers, this seems to be a plan to destroy large areas of World Heritage wilderness, including Gundungurra cultural heritage and hectares of habitat, thousands of hectares of habitat of endangered species, as well as homes and farmland. It's a terrible idea.
Thank you for that. That's good. Susan Templeman, what would your take be on this one?
Well, I'm happy to share some of my observations, but it is obviously a New South Wales government decision. And it's been one they've been struggling with since 1993 when John Fahey first suggested this. Now, the latest attempt is considered flawed by government agencies, the government's own agencies, by the insurance industry and by experts, some of whom have been quoted already this evening. One of the reports does show that if the wall is raised, that the water will lie on the floodplain much longer than it currently does. And right now, we've still got hundreds and hundreds of acres of land that is unable to be used because of the water still sitting on it and not draining away. And I think that part of the responsibility of the state government will be to really inform those people who are suffering so terribly now what the consequence would be in, say, a 1 in 100 flood, where it might be 11 extra days, up to a couple of weeks longer that water would sit. So I know we're going to talk about evacuation routes later on, and that will be an important question to consider as well. But all these issues that have been raised, there needs to be really transparent discussion by the state government so that it isn't just a snow job or a con job. People need to go be fully informed about the realities of it rather than just the PR material, the spin that has been put out to date.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Tony Pettit, what do you think? Do you think the dam wall should be raised?
I think certainly no. If you're looking for a catastrophe, extend it. If the people that built that wall knew what they were doing, don't you think they would have put 20 metres on it when they built it? You can't build a dam and keep extending it up. Just have a look on Google and search dam failures, especially in America. One dam that they kept extending up to improve their hydroelectricity generation eventually tipped over and killed about 680 people. That's the sort of situation we're looking at. They already extended it 5 metres. Well, why did they only do it 5 metres? Oh, we'll just have a go and see if it works, if it's okay. Now they want to put another 15 metres on it. Well, hello, I've done engineering and I've studied dam construction, and I know that the main thing about the dams is the foundations. Now, those foundations on Warragamba Dam will not take an extension. If you want to flush out the whole of Sydney, let alone the Hawkesbury, and send a 100-metre tsunami through Sydney, that's what's going to happen if that dam fails. Dams fails. Just look on Google at dam failures and you'll see what's happening. It's not structurally capable of supporting an extension. Now, we don't have to have flooding of the Hawkesbury at all if they manage the dam and the storage and the water and control release the water prior to floods. We all knew this rain period was coming weeks before it came. Why didn't they do a control release of that dam to lower the levels so they could mitigate the Hawkesbury instead of waiting till after the rain stopped a week down the track when it was full to the brim and pulled the chain and flushed the Hawkesbury residents out through the Brooklyn? That is a deliberate act of vandalism. It doesn't have to happen. Why are they doing it? Because they're panicking about water shortages at the next drought we're going to have. We're going to have a severe drought soon. And if we don't have enough water, which we won't have, because Warragamba Dam doesn't hold enough water for the next drought. The population has expanded. The consumption of water has expanded. What we were supposed to do when the Warragamba Dam was built was to proceed to the Colo River and build another dam up there that was going to be 3 times the size and supply a hydroelectric scheme to Sydney.
Okay, good. Thanks, Tony. That was a long one. I have to say, I've got to warn everybody about the long ones. But that was good. That was good. You covered a lot of points there. Thank you for everybody for that one. Now, question 3 here. This is from North Richmond and Districts Community Action Association. Now, it says here, the Liberal candidate, Sarah Richards, claims the Morrison government is the only government that can build a 3rd crossing of the Hawkesbury River. Is that correct? It's a fair question. Now, Greg, can you give us your take on that, first of all, if you would?
Sure. Thanks, Tony. Oh, the statement doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm very keen to hear the justification for that statement from Sarah. I don't see why any government of the day can't build a bridge, particularly if it's critical to mitigate risk to human life and to provide safe travel. The government is obviously obliged to provide infrastructure, incorporating the wisdom of folks who know, the Hawkesbury residents in this case. Good government acts in the public interest, using public money sensibly and in consultation with local communities. Our residents and our community organisations are best placed to understand local conditions and infrastructure needs to provide advice to whichever government is in power to ensure the best possible outcomes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. We'll get Nicole Evans' take on this now.
Absolutely not. A Craig Kelly government is also willing and capable.
Excellent. That was to the point, that one. There we go. That's good. Tony Hickey of the Greens, what do you think about this? Is the Morrison government the only government that can build a third crossing?
No, of course it isn't. This is not the Liberal Party's money. This is public money. It's money that belongs to us. It's been allocated in successive state and federal budgets already. Perhaps the Liberal Party is the only party that's going to spend $500 million on a bridge that doesn't actually improve access during floods and doesn't fix traffic congestion. But the Greens think that public money should be doing more than just buying votes. It should provide real solutions that communities need well into the future, especially when safety and disaster resilience is at stake.
Okay, thank you. Susan, what's your take on that?
Well, if this is what the Liberal candidate is saying, it's a typical Liberal scare tactic, and I certainly had people tell me this at the show, so I wasn't surprised to see this come up in questions. Labor is committed to the duplication of North Richmond Bridge. I stood on that bridge in 2010 with Anthony Albanese, and we announced the first $20 million to investigate what the options were for the traffic problems back then that people faced. Our commitment has never wavered. It took some time for the duplication report to be done, and then unfortunately we lost government in 2013 and this whole project just lapsed. And I should point out that when I did this in 2010, the Liberals at the time poo-pooed the idea and dismissed it as not being necessary, but I had seen it myself, and the North Richmond Districts and Community Association had actually flagged this issue with me in one of the very first meetings I went to in the Hawkesbury. So I have the longest standing and deepest commitment to this, and it will certainly be something that an Albanese Labor government sees through with the New South Wales government and ensures that there's a transparent process. And I would agree, I think we'd be wasting time and money if we didn't look at ensuring it improved the flood resilience of our community.
Okay, thank you. Tony Pettit, what do you think? Do you think that the Morrison government is the only government that can build that third crossing?
I think that's ludicrous, actually, because we need more crossings across the Hawkesbury River. If you have a look at the Georges River and have a look at how many crossings that are scattered up and down the Georges River, very similar river to what we've got here. They put the Windsor Bridge in the wrong place. That should have been down at Wilberforce. And they could have left the existing bridge that was there for light traffic. Now, we leave the North Richmond Bridge there. We put another one upstream and another one downstream. We put traffic that can go into Penrith. We put traffic that can come down from the northern side of Richmond Road into Richmond, and we put traffic through to Richmond. Why do we funnel everything into, absolute traffic mayhem?
Look, I think I'll just interrupt you a second with that, because I think that's fine, but let's just get to the root of the question, if you can. Do you think that any government, if you like, is the only government that can do this project?
I think
just briefly,
any governments in power should start putting a bit more money into the Hawkesbury. It's not just one government that can do it. If they can't do it, you vote them out and you put someone else in to do the job. Yeah. We need a master plan for this area, and we haven't got one, and all we get is band-aids all the time. Let's try a bit of forward planning and not crisis management all the time. I mean, $500,000 for that roadworks and bridge that's going across there. I don't get it. 200,000 for the Hawkesbury Bridge, $100,000 for the Jim Anderson Bridge. The duplication of Iron Cove Bridge in Sydney was $300 million. I should say million, not thousands, sorry.
No, that's all right. All good. Thank you. Now, Sarah, look, obviously, this is an important question. I mean, give us your sort of take on this and also your the background on it. And is it true, actually? Is the comment true?
First of all, what I find fascinating is that this is the only question that quotes me as a Liberal candidate. There's no other question targeting the comments of any other candidates in any other realm. And, you know, I've been in politics long enough now that when I started in politics, I was quite, you know, polite and didn't want to upset anyone. But now I just speak my mind and call it out for what it is. This was an attack on the Liberal Party, and it was an attack on the Morrison government. Now, I have made those comments because it is under a Morrison coalition government that these funds have been committed. Even if government changes, excuse my cough, I've been talking too much at pre-poll.
Oh, you're right.
Even if government changes in the next few days, this money, and it is taxpayers' money, but it has been allocated, as I said before, by a government who has been able to manage the economy and have the funds available. Now, that will forever have happened under a Morrison government. You can't change that, but it will be the state government who builds and constructs the bridge. As we've all said, we all agree on the fact that stage one, the upgrade of the Driftway, is going to go ahead. That's now got planning approval, and I'm so pleased that we'll be able to see that happening. But let's just also say, I'd like to say it's very easy to sit there and complain and whinge about something that's being delivered when the responsibility of delivering is not on your shoulders. So I know I'm not elected as a federal MP, but the party I represent is the government. So what I'd like to see from other candidates is to quit the constant criticism, and maybe if responsibility was on their shoulders, what they'd actually do.
That's good. But do you actually think that only the Morrison government could deliver this?
But I just answered that, Tony, because they did deliver the funding under their term of government.
Yes, but obviously the project's got to be built. I mean, I just want to delve into that a little bit. It's got to be built. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Labor becomes a government. Okay, do you think that they cannot build it or won't build it? What would be the reason they wouldn't do that?
I would like to see that they will continue on with what the Morrison government has started.
Fair enough. Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. And okay, so that's that one. So now on to question 4. And let me just check. This one is from Community Action for Windsor Bridge. And the question is, the combined $637 million for 2 bridges, Windsor and Richmond, will see no meaningful improvement in flood resilience, they say. What plans do you have to ensure lives are protected by providing strategically planned evacuation routes? Obviously, the evacuation routes issue is a big one for all of us. So we'll start off with Nicole Evans and get her views through our colleague here.
This is a multifaceted question which requires cooperation from many people. This is a big job with so many lives and properties at stake. The route must be designed with minimal disruption as to few people as possible, while simultaneously providing an evacuation route for people who live on the floodplain. I will liaise with those involved to ensure that the route is safe, economical and practical.
Excellent, thank you. Tony Hickey for the Greens. Can you give us your views on this, please?
There's a lot of background work that still needs to be done about this, especially about flood modelling across the entire Hawkesbury-Nepean catchment, including South Creek catchment, which is now substantially changed. And we need that studies to understand where overland flows end up, and these overland flows are caused by overdevelopment. And the state government has not yet completed this work. The federal government could enforce disaster preparedness legislation and demand that all tiers of government have a whole of catchment plan for safety, service provision, and future land use. we need to keep in mind that these evacuation routes are just as important in bushfires, and we just have to stop building on the South Creek and the Hawkesbury Nepean floodplains and stop building on evacuation routes. It doesn't matter how high the roads and bridges are if there's nowhere to go once you hit Marsden Park. We simply can't just get all the people to safety in a major flood. We need a whole of catchment approach with a moratorium on development enforced by the state government. The Greens housing policy will curb urban sprawl and speculative housing development. It'll bring back developer influence, and so will our plans to limit political donations. The Greens will double funding to emergency services like RFS and SES, and we'll also help communities prepare for disasters. With climate change making disasters more and more frequent, the government's role is crucial here. Yep. The Greens are the only party which have a plan to reduce emissions to consistent with 1.5 degrees of global warming. The Labor and Liberal parties have given up on
we'll
that.
Have to stop it there a bit, Tony, because you're going a bit off the evacuation routes. Interesting though it is, of course. Susan Templeman, so mainly the question is really, what plans do you have or would you put forward to ensure lives are protected by providing these strategically planned evacuation routes?
Yeah, well, and there are certainly things governments can do, and we demonstrated that previously in government using the engineering expertise and science advice, not to assist developers, but to save lives. And the example in the Hawkesbury would be the Jim Anderson Bridge, built by Labor. But we also put the spillways on the dam. So they're the sorts of things governments can do. Right now, the experts tell us that evacuation routes are crucial. In 2017, the state government knocked back a proposal that would have cost $950 million to improve evacuation routes. They just chose not to do it. And so we need to revisit those evacuation routes. I note the government has announced that there are 100 projects that it could do in the floodplain. We're not being given any details of what projects they are within the Hawkesbury area, but I would hope that some of them are in the Hawkesbury because they could be acted on immediately. Things like the Pitt Town evacuation route, which could be upgraded relatively simply to provide a safe exit for people at a time of crisis. These are the sorts of really practical things that can be done, and they can be done quite quickly. They just need a government with the willpower to do it. And as a federal government, if we become the government, we will convert the $4.8 billion emergency response fund into a mitigation and preparation fund. And that will every year deliver $200 million to these sorts of mitigation and preparation projects. So that as a federal government, an Albanese Labor government would be backing in the New South Wales government in making our community safer.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's brilliant. Tony Pettit, what do you think about evacuation routes and what should we be doing about that?
I think it's a after the horse bolted thing. If we did the right thing in the first place, we wouldn't have this situation. If the dam was mitigated properly, we wouldn't have the massive floods that we've been getting, and I described that earlier. To have situations where I'm being told to prepare for flooding, well, government should be preparing to not have floods and do their job properly, use the Warragamba Dam to mitigate floods and take all that away. We wouldn't have to do all this sort of stuff. It's basically an afterthought, and again, it's crisis management.
I think we said, I just wanted to say though, I think we need to stick to the thing about evacuation routes, because I take your point there, but we live in a flood area, we're going to have floods. So what would you do about planned evacuation routes?
Floods, and I explained that earlier. I don't think I got it across clearly. We do not have to have floods if governments and the authorities do the right things. If the people managing Warragamba Dam were capable of letting water out 2 weeks beforehand, they know how much rain falls, they know how long it takes to fill the dam, they know how much water's gone out, and they know how much water's coming down. We don't need to have floods, then we won't need these evacuation routes. Okay. Sure, we need a flood-free bridge for the odd occasion that it happens, but look at Windsor Bridge. They put it sloping down towards Freeman's Reach. Why don't they build it level so that they
Okay.
could build up a viaduct to Wilberforce.
All right, thank you. That's good. Thank you for that. Sarah, what's your take on this one about flood evacuation routes?
Thank you very much. We will always need evacuation routes. We can't not have evacuation routes because there will always be times where people need to get out of their homes and get out of harm's way. Now, as Ms. Templeman already touched on, the government has announced $33 million for a planning study that will develop a program of works to address more than 100 identified road infrastructure constraints to existing flood evacuation routes in areas within the Hawkesbury-Nepean Valley. Now, this includes things such as road widening, new culvert and road raising, pinch point upgrades, and drainage improvements. As anyone who knows who has been in this sphere for a very long time, that is all part of the Hawkesbury-Nepean Valley flood risk management strategy, which is something that the state government obviously has been working on for quite a few years. So with the money now allocated for that planning study, and after everything our community has been in over the last couple of years, the community should know that the funds are there, it will get underway, and once the planning study has acutely identified where those infrastructure improvements will be, we can get on with the job of improving those evacuation routes. Now, I was at the Pitt Town Progress Association meeting on Monday night with the Mayor, where we talked about the need for the Pitt Town evacuation route to be upgraded, and I would hope that it does become part of that planning study. And I think all levels of government have identified that that needs to be the case, but not just in Pitt Town, but of course across the whole Hawkesbury-Nepean Valley.
I think though, I don't want to get into this too much, but I just recall that when that money was announced, those pinch points that they were looking at were primarily around Penrith area, weren't they? I don't think there were that many in the Hawkesbury, or has that not been decided yet?
Oh, look, I wish I had the answer for you, Tony. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. I think that they had identified that, and the valley, we've got to understand, while we live in the Hawkesbury part of it, the valley, of course, does take into account the Nepean part. And that is, even though it's got two different names, it's exactly the same river. So yeah. I would hope that in that planning study, there is a lot identified for the Hawkesbury, but I just couldn't give you an answer on that one yet.
No, fair enough. Thanks for that. Thank you. Okay, and Greg, could you just give us your take on it, please?
Yes, thank you, Tony. I'd aim to provide adequate federal funding for a re-evaluation of the SES's emergency management plan, particularly considering the local knowledge gained in the wake of recent flooding. This immediate review would be in consultation with flood mitigation experts to devise the best evacuation routes. Given the likelihood of further and possibly more extreme flooding events occurring as the effects of climate change are manifested, we can't wait until the next event has occurred. Further substantial federal funding will then be necessary not only for evaluation of strategies, but to implement those strategies that some experts in the field have urged to be adopted urgently. We need immediate real action from government on the effects of climate change, particularly in the Macquarie.
Yep.
It'd also be wise to not have future developments built on the floodplain.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. Now, question 5, this is from the Hawkesbury Environment Network. And this is a question here. So Cumberland Plain woodland is fast disappearing due to overdevelopment, they say. Will the candidates commit, if elected, to stronger protection of Western Sydney woodlands via the EPBC Act? So Tony Hickey, could you sort of kick off with this one?
Thanks, Tony. Yes, since European arrival, about 90% of that Cumberland woodland has been cleared. And the remaining bits are the only reminder that we have of what Western Sydney used to look like. We have to stop destroying bushland. We need bushland to help us absorb greenhouse gases. We need to protect the habitats of native species. And that's not just plants and koalas and the local birds, but also just bees and butterflies that pollinate the food plants that we grow as well. Today, the Greens announced our zero extinction policy, and we can't stop extinctions without protecting the Cumberland Plain. There are species in the Cumberland Plain woodland that are unique to the woodland. The federal government needs much stronger environmental protection powers. The EPBC Act, the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, is to protect and manage nationally and internationally important flora, fauna, ecological communities and heritage places. And the Cumberland Plain is definitely one of these and should be protected.
Okay.
What we want is proper environmental protection laws that can't be overridden by state or federal governments of any particular political persuasion. When we designate an area for protection, it needs to stay protected, and it shouldn't have to be a constant battle to try and save that every time some developers or a government wants to change it.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. Susan, what's your take on this one?
Our environmental laws are not fit for purpose in the 21st century. And the EPBC Act is one of those pieces of legislation that not only doesn't protect the environment, but it also doesn't provide certainty for people wanting to do major developments. I'm not talking about housing developments, I'm talking about any kind of project. So it does need to be reformed. It was, Tony, this is the legislation that the current government's put forward was actually Tony Abbott's legislation. So totally inadequate. And this is one of our priorities in government, to improve the environmental laws so they provide certainty for those wanting to do projects, major projects, but they provide the protections that we need. Now, the Cumberland Plain has also been subjected to double dipping by all sorts of projects through Western Sydney, where someone has said, I'm doing a project, but I'm going to preserve this amount of Cumberland Plain, this patch. Someone else has said, oh, I'm going to preserve that patch too. Now, the Cumberland Plain is a really crucial part of the biodiversity that we have on the plains. And we need to make sure that projects going forward do not continue to undermine it. And if it's an offset, then it really is just a single offset, not used multiple times. So, that's actually why we need a National Integrity Commission, to make sure that those sorts of things can't happen.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Tony Pettit, what do you think about this then? Would you want stronger protection of Western Sydney woodlands?
Look, I'm appalled at the loss of that area in my lifetime. I think it's atrocious what developers have done to the city basin, and the way that area has suffered. It was supposed to be preserved for generations and for our future. The word Cumberland goes back to the Greater Cumberland Development Plan, which was all planned for Sydney, and that included everything from market gardens, rural, residential, industrial, development and planning for the whole city. It's just been turned into an absolute soup bowl. And that area is one of the areas that's copped it in the neck because of these hungry developers wanting to build and rip and bust and tear everything up all over the place. We would have had a far much better city to live in, with parks and gardens and everything all around it, if that original development plan for the Greater Cumberland area had been stuck to in the beginning. But it's been got at, and sure, this area's copped it.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about this. I'm just going to have to get a power cable and plug this in because I've got hardly any power left. Just bear with me a second.
We're a slick operation.
It's instant. There we are. Excellent. Thanks for that. Okay. Yeah, Sarah, what's your take on this one, the woodlands situation?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Can I just say and apologise to everyone for my voice? I think 3 days standing in the rain and non-stop talking to people is having an impact, which is surprising because I never usually lose my voice. So I just wanted to say that I note that the second independent review of the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act was released in January 2021. So just to give you, I guess, a little bit of context on that one, the independent review of the EPBC Act is actually required every 10 years. The review found that the EPBC Act did require significant reform. Already the federal government is acting on those reviews recommendations, and has invested $10.6 million in streamlining environmental approvals via single touch approvals for certain projects. The Commissioner will independently monitor and audit environmental assessment and approval systems. I note that there are several projects occurring across Western Sydney, of course, where we all live, which interface with the EPBC Act, including the M12 Western Sydney Freeway Link and the Sydney Metro Greater West Western Sydney Airport Rail Link. These projects, it must be remembered, also represent millions of dollars in economic activity and are already supporting so many jobs for so many people in our community. And I don't want to see those projects delayed because they are also vital to our economic recovery. But it is important that the reform process that I just outlined a minute ago does take place.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, thank you for that. And it's good to get that background as well. You know, it really is. Thank you. Greg, could you just give us your views on this?
Yes, Tony, thank you. Well, I have a passion for the Cumberland Plain woodlands, a personal love affair. Today, only 9%, as Tony said, over 90% has gone. So 9% of the original Cumberland Plain woodland remains, with only remnants scattered widely and very disconnected. The Cumberland Plain is around 2,750 square kilometres, and it shapes the geography of Sydney. It is home to the state's largest human settlement with over 1 million residents and rising fast. It's also home to many of the species of threatened plants and animals and has significant biodiversity values. Its status is critically endangered. It was the first endangered ecological community listed under Commonwealth legislation for protection, and a fat lot of good that's done it since 1999. I first started fighting for the retention of Cumberland Plain in 2001 on the former ADI site development by Lend-Lease. The power of business over government or over public interest won out on that development, and the situation for the Cumberland Plain has now become critical. The Environmental Protection Biodiversity Protection, the EPBC Act, to save 3 seconds, is the final bastion of protection for our environment at a federal level, and it's failing.
Right. Okay.
The report was damning. The current government knows but refuses to overhaul the Act as it benefits exploitation over protection, profit over planet, and I would fight to overhaul the EPBC to reflect the current environmental crisis and to meet the evolving community expectations.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. Again, a very wholesome answer there. That's good. And let's hear from Nicole Evans through our colleague here about her views on this.
Absolutely.
That's it, eh? But that's very direct and to the point. There we go. Okay. Rightio. Now, we've got this. This is, I think, the last question, you know, that we posed to the candidates. We'll have some more afterwards as well. Now, if elected, this one, by the way, is from Hawkesbury Ratepayers and Residents Action Association, that group. If elected, will you guarantee to listen to and make representations for any in the electorate who seek your assistance, no matter their political leanings? Which you know, it's a good question, I think. So, Susan, what do you think about that?
My team and I have demonstrated for the last 6 years that we're not interested in how someone voted in an election. We're interested in whether we can advocate for them or assist them in battling through bureaucracy or being linked up and connected with somebody who may be able to help them through a really difficult time. So the proof is in the pudding, and we know we are far from perfect in getting solutions for everybody, but our objective is to try for everyone. And they certainly don't, when they walk in our office door, they don't get asked, how did you vote? It is completely irrelevant when you're the representative. It's been a real privilege to represent people who have said to me, well, we didn't vote for you. And I say, it really doesn't matter. You've got a problem and we will do our very best to try and solve it.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Tony Pettit, what do you reckon about this one?
Well, if I was successfully elected to represent this area, that's exactly what I do. And I do that via full consultation, and if need be, implement a citizens referendum that we could have in the local area on important issues to find out what the actual local people of the area really wanted the government to do. And then I would take that and bat for those people, whatever the results, even if it's contrary to my beliefs and ideas.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's good. Excellent. Sarah, what's your take on it? So I need to say something different other than what's your take on it every time. I'm sorry about that. But what do you think about this one?
Look, of course, that's why we put our hands up to represent the community. And over the last 5.5 years as a councillor, I can't tell you the number of inquiries that have come through to me that I know for a fact are not Liberal voters, and I couldn't care less. They've needed help with their road being fixed, or with some delays they've had with getting their shed built or their pool sorted out. So of course, absolutely. And I actually think the biggest thing that I have done that could prove that is back in 2018, when the Liberal New South Wales state government put forward a proposal for our community for 2 corridors to go through, one through Grosvale and one through Oakville. Now, I had so many meetings and went to so many homes of people throughout that process that I knew were not Liberal voters. And what I did was write a 6-page document against my own Liberal Party, who was in the state government, saying that those proposals were wrong for our community. And I spoke about them on the public record. So I think that people need to know, not only will I help anyone who needs help, but I'll also speak against something when it's wrong, if I know that it's wrong for our community.
Excellent, thank you. And Greg, what do you think about this then? Do you think, you know, no matter what people's political leanings, you would be able to help them?
Yes, definitely, Tony. This is a reasonable question, but unfortunately it's one that should not have to be asked. It's the obligation of every elected member of parliament to represent each and every constituent with equal dedication and service. Politics is about public service, and that's forgotten. And we often hear that echo through the hollowed halls of Parliament House, while some of our elected representatives seem to act without honour. It's time to bring honour back to politics, and we need to add compassion and respect to ensure that the needs of every person are heard and met, regardless of their political persuasion or their cultural background, their religion or gender. It's time for it really is come to the crunch time for equality. We need to ensure equality and inclusion in politics, and justice and fairness in government. It's just, it's expected in civil society.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that point up, that really it shouldn't be a question that needs to be asked, I suppose, but obviously people, you know, feel that it does. So let's hear from Nicole Evans on this and see what she thinks.
Of course. One of the reasons I decided to run for Parliament is because I feel that there isn't enough real life experience in Canberra. There are too many career politicians and not enough everyday people to represent the electorate constituents. The UAP is the party of free speech. We appreciate all political viewpoints and do not judge or discriminate accordingly. If elected, I will represent the people of Macquarie fairly and without bias.
Thank you, that's great. And last one here is Tony Hickey then from the Greens. What would you say to this one, Tony?
Definitely. One of the Greens' 4 principles is grassroots democracy, and we take consultation and representation very seriously. And it's why we've campaigned against the big donations that go to the 2 major parties, because they are a corruption of grassroots democracy. In the Hawkesbury, you've had Greens councillors for more than 2 decades, and you've seen those people answer your phone calls, come to you and discuss issues and serve you regardless of whether you voted Greens or not. And in state parliament, you've seen people like David Shoebridge come out to the Hawkesbury and talk to the local people and then take their issues back to the parliament and fight on their behalf. And I think I hope that you'll vote Green in Macquarie, but I also want you to vote Greens in the Senate so that David Shoebridge can get into the Senate and continue that great work that he's been doing in the federal parliament.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Look, those are the questions. Thank you, everybody, for that. Those are the questions that our groups put forward. Now, we've got a little bit of time. So what we'll do is let's look at some moderated questions from the audience. So these are questions that have come in while everybody's been talking. And we've got a team of folks here who are making sure they, you know, don't have any swear words in and things like that. So let's just go through a few of those. And what I'll do, look, just to make it fair, we'll go back to the listing of people, of candidates, and we'll go through it that way, I think. So we'll go back to question one in that sense. So look, here's one about high density housing. Oh, yes. Okay, yes. And 30 seconds on each one of these, folks, I've been told. Otherwise, I get a slap across the head or something. So please stick to the 30 if you can. Now, okay, so this is about high density housing. Do you think high density housing is appropriate for the Hawkesbury? So let's ask Susan Templeman first about that, if we may.
I think getting the balance in housing right is really difficult, and that is something that the state and council have to think about. For me, though, any housing we have in the Hawkesbury has to recognise the how we value our semi-agricultural, semi-rural existence. So these are difficult planning decisions to make, but we also have to recognise that no one wants to see overdevelopment of our peri-urban region.
Yeah, thank you. And Tony Pettit, if you could, do you think high density housing is appropriate for the Hawkesbury?
Oh, no, it's not really, because we really don't have the infrastructure to take the load of all the people. Look at the traffic jams around at the moment. I mean, it's absolutely hopeless. I mean, if you're going to increase the amount of people living in the Hawkesbury, well, you've got to do more than just let people build houses willy-nilly all over the place. But on the other hand, I mean, people are allowed to put granny flats all around where I am in Bligh Park, but your person who's on 5 or 10 or 20 acres can't put a second home on their property for their family. I mean, it's hypocritical in its whole sense, but I think we need to look at the whole Hawkesbury as a whole. Can we cope with, say, doubling our population? No, okay. We can't even cope with another 10%.
Right, that's good. Thanks, Tony. That's brilliant. Sarah, if you would, what do you think about this?
The fact that we don't have significant amounts of high density housing already in the Hawkesbury, I think, is the answer. We don't want it. And what's important in looking at any future housing, and, you know, I've obviously been part of this significantly with council, is learning what the targets are of the Greater Sydney Commission. Now, the Greater Sydney Commission has said that over the next few years, the only increase in housing for the Hawkesbury area is just over 5,000 homes. Now, with homes that are already on the agenda, those through developments that are still to come, which again, didn't vote on them, was Jacaranda Ponds at Glossodia and of course Vineyard Stage 1. When those developments actually get built, it's already reached the Greater Sydney Commission target. So there's not an appetite on any level of government to increase that.
Okay, thank you. That's good. So I'm getting a bit of a tickly thing as well, but I've had COVID already, so it's not that. Greg, well, can you just give us like about 30 seconds on this? What do you think about the high density housing? Is it appropriate for the Hawkesbury?
No, Tony, don't believe it is appropriate for the Hawkesbury, the same as it's not appropriate for the Blue Mountains. We had to really rally the troops to stave off a state Liberal government push for medium and high density housing in the Blue Mountains. And the same applies to the Hawkesbury.
Fair enough.
It certainly hasn't got the infrastructure.
Yes, yeah, fair enough. Now, Nicole Evans, we won't have an answer from her for this one, unfortunately. Tony Hickey, the Greens, what do you think about this?
Yeah, high density housing in the Hawkesbury and the Blue Mountains in the Macquarie electorate is not appropriate. It goes back to what I was saying before about public transport, though. In cities where there is high density, then public transport, it's easy to get around and things like that. Where we don't have high density, we need decent public transport so that people can get from place to place, because things are further apart when it's lower density. And that's one thing where the Macquarie electorate has. I know we've got a couple of train lines, but apart from that, the public transport is woefully inadequate. Okay,
thank you, brilliant. You just got in the 30 seconds there as well. Well done, well done. Okay, so another question here. What is your personal view on NDIS and supporting the more vulnerable members of our community in the Hawkesbury? So look, let's go to Tony Pettit first on that one, if you would. What's your thoughts about NDIS, Tony? 30 seconds.
I think we should basically, we should look after the people that need to be looked after. And I'm always open to that sort of thing. And I have a very close friend who's involved with NDIS. And I think you've got to talk to those people and find out what's really going on. And they certainly have some issues. And if I was in government, we've got to look after people that need looking after. And these guys do, well, guys and gals do need looking after. We just can't ignore them and walk away from them.
Thank you, Tony. That's brilliant. Sarah, and I'm sorry to everybody for 30 seconds, but we want to get a few in here. What do you reckon about this? What's your personal view on NDIS?
Thank you very much. I think the NDIS has proven that it has helped over 500,000 Australians who are now part of the scheme. And of course, in transferring people onto something that's not brand new, but relatively new idea, and getting people their plans right and the services available to them right is something that's always going to provide challenges. But I think one positive in moving forward is that the NDIS is fully costed over the next and fully funded for the next 4 years moving forward. And I think that gives a great amount of relief to the participants in it who are in it. But of course, there's always more to do to get it right.
Okay, thank you for that. And let's go to Greg on this one next, if you could, Greg.
Sure, thanks, Tony. Just my opinion from personal experience is that it's essential in our society. It seems to function very well. It had a rocky start, but it is something that we need to have, and it's certainly a reflection of a good, caring, compassionate community.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Tony Hickey, what's your thoughts on this?
The NDIS is crucial for preserving the dignity and giving opportunities to people with disabilities, and therefore it needs to be properly funded by the federal government. And the way to do that is, and not to try and cut costs at every opportunity and therefore deprive people of the services that they need. And the way to do that is to properly tax large corporations and make them pay what they deserve to the Australian public.
Okay, thank you. And Susan Templeman, your thoughts?
Well, the NDIS is a great Labor idea from a decade ago, but it's been appallingly implemented by the Morrison government. And my office deals with people who are not having better lives because of their interactions with the National Disability Insurance Authority. We deal with them daily. This system needs to be taken back to what it was meant to be, and that is something that gives dignity, respect and choice to people who have a disability and their families. So it has enormous potential. When it works, it changes lives. Right now, there are two types of people on the NDIS, those who've had cuts to their plan and those who
30 seconds, Susan, sorry.
Well, that's the last bit, those who are afraid of cuts.
Okay, thank you, excellent. Now, here's a question about ICAC, which is always an interesting one, I guess. So one of our readers, listeners, viewers has said, please outline your position on honesty, transparency and accountability in public office and your support or otherwise of a federal ICAC. So, what do you think about a federal ICAC? So, Sarah, if we could go first to you with this, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's no doubt that I would fully support a National Integrity Commission. We all put our hand up in these roles with the expectation that we all are acting honestly and of course with integrity. So of course there needs to be a body around that. What I'd like to put on the record though is, as someone who has spent probably the last 3 years since the last election trying to be taken out of this race and not run as the Liberal candidate, is that throwing accusations and mud at people that obviously proved to be completely wrong. I'd like to see some people in the Hawkesbury lift their own standards as well in targeting people. But of course, those who enter politics need to be held accountable for their decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good. Greg, if you could give us your take on this, what do you reckon about ICAC, a federal ICAC?
Yeah, Tony. Well, it's unfortunately an essential tool. As the years roll on, you can see that the way that our government officials, our parliamentarians act, and the scandals, some proven, some not, lots of allegations, a lot of mud, but performance is not good. So yes, I fully support an ICAC. There's no doubt about it.
Thanks for that. Tony Hickey, what do you think?
The Greens have been pushing for this for a long time. We've had a New South Wales ICAC for a long time. The federal ICAC needs to be at least as strong as the New South Wales ICAC, and it's appalling that no federal government so far has actually implemented one.
Thank you. Susan, what do you think about this one?
Well, Labor's policy is to implement a national anti-corruption commission, because that's what we're talking about here, corruption, where whether it's parliamentarians, their staff, statutory office holders, anyone connected with the system is making decisions that advantage them and are not in the public interest. We've committed to bringing one in. So did the Morrison government. They committed to one more than 1,200 days ago. We will bring one in if we're elected, and the legislation will be there by Christmas.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And Tony Pettit here. What do you think about a federal ICAC, for want of a better word?
Yeah, well, I've been involved with New South Wales ICAC, and what do you do when ICAC becomes corrupt and they need investigating? We saw the New South Wales Police being asked by ICAC, the ICAC, to investigate corruption in New South Wales Police Force. Did they do it? No, they didn't. They said there was no case to be heard. But when there was a Royal Commission brought in by John Hatton in the South Coast, what did he find? Corruption in the New South Wales Police Force. Well,
But we'll have to stop it there. But okay, we need to focus on the federal angle with that. But thank you, that's good. Okay, another question here. This is about phone coverage, and I think all of us in the Hawkesbury know that it's not brilliant for a lot of people. So what would the candidates do to ensure the Macdonald Valley, so often called the Cotton Valley, as we know, has mobile coverage, which is lacking? So we'll go to Greg on this first, if you could.
Thanks, Tony. Well, surprisingly, I'm sitting on a hill just off the western escarpment of the Blue Mountains near the Gardens of Stone, and I have to find a specific hill to get a signal. So I can sympathise with the people in the valley. More investment. Yep. More investment in infrastructure. It's just an essential tool that we need in the Australian landscape.
Okay, thank you. Brilliant. Tony Hickey?
Areas which are inhabited by people, people in the 21st century need phones in order to be part of the community. And so it's essential that they have proper coverage, and the coverage in remote areas where people live needs to be as good as it is in the inner cities.
Thank you. Susan, what's your take on it?
Well, the Liberals promised the Macdonald Valley would have an extra mobile phone tower around about 6 years ago, and that has been a total catastrophe. It hasn't been able to find a place to go because the program, the mobile black spot program, as it's being operated, doesn't work. Needs to be fixed. There is a small commitment that council is working on to get some technology in there. If I'm elected, we'll look to ensure that that's an appropriate solution for the Macdonald Valley. They need something. It's a matter of life and death.
Yeah, yes, fair point. Thank you. Tony Pettit, what would you do about this?
Well, I think in the short term, they need communications, and I thought it was the responsibility of telecommunications run by the federal government to make sure that everybody had fair and reasonable access to communications. Well, if they haven't got it, give it to them at the cost of the government. And with the way satellite technology is going at the moment, they'll soon be able to connect that area with satellites for their communications. And we're not talking about a fixed position satellites. We're talking about positions where you can actually move around with your phone and have a normal conversation. And if it's a bad area to connect, it should be connected to the rest of the system at no cost to the person on top of what a normal connection would be.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. I'll have to cut you off a bit there. Sarah, what's your view on this, on the Macdonald Valley particularly?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Under the Black Spot program, of course, there has been significant investment in phone coverage across Macquarie. However, I have had recent correspondence with the Macdonald Valley Association, and should I be elected, as the MP in 10 days' time, I will advocate to ensure they are one of my top priorities in getting that service there. I think what's also important to consider when that happens is for any community, there needs to be some sort of flexibility as well with where that infrastructure will go, because when the funding comes through, a lot of people then say, well, I don't want it in my backyard, or I don't want it near me. So there has to be some level of cooperation about, yes, the funding's here, and try and get some sort of quick agreement within the community about where that can go.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Thanks very much. Okay, on to another question here. I don't think I missed anybody out there, did I? What plans does each candidate have to provide improved mental health services to youth in the Hawkesbury? So basically a mental health question here. Let's go to Tony Hickey first, if we may, on that one.
Thanks, Tony. I'm not sure if people have heard, but the Greens have a plan to put dental and mental health care into Medicare, so that people don't have to ruin their lives financially in order to get the proper dental and mental health care that they need. Yeah, we think that's something that should be taken over by Medicare, and that it shouldn't be someone who has mental health issues shouldn't have to pay through the nose in order to deal with those.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. And Susan Templeman, what's your view on this?
Well, improving youth mental health issues was one of the things that pushed me into politics, and it's been something I've spoken about consistently since my inaugural speech. I was really pleased to announce that if Labor was elected, we would provide funding for the Hawkesbury Headspace, and it was a delight to see that a week later the Morrison government announced that actually they had the money and suddenly they could provide it. So I think the advocacy that I've undertaken for so many years has paid off, but there is so much to do to extend the support for young people, but also to adults. And today I welcomed an announcement that an adult version, a sort of trimmed down version of Headspace, would become a permanent feature. So we are making headway in Headspace.
Okay. Thank you. Excellent. And Tony Pettit, what do you think about this? So mental health services to youth, particularly in the Hawkesbury, what would you do about that, or do you think needs to be done?
Well, firstly, I think it's atrocious to see that we've got such an epidemic of youth mental issues. And I mean, yeah, we need to do something about this. Why is it happening? You know, let's go to the root cause. And of course, help these people get out of these situations they're in. We should be always looking after the sick people, whether it is dental or whether it's mental health or physical health, or you know, like you cut yourself open or you need an operation. Why can't we keep our population healthy, irrespective of your income levels, whether you have or have not? You should be able to be cared for without any question.
Yep, good, excellent, thank you. That's interesting. Sarah, what would be your view on this?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I think that it's very obvious that I have been as the candidate able to secure funding from the coalition government for a Headspace satellite office in Katoomba, and of course an additional $4.4 million for the Headspace to be built within the Hawkesbury. So 3 years ago, when I became a Liberal candidate for the federal seat of Macquarie, and of course during this federal election now, again, another legacy that I'll be proud of being a part of, delivering those two Headspace services to the Hawkesbury and the Blue Mountains, which make up the seat of Macquarie.
Thank you. Sorry, Greg, could you give us your thoughts on this? I think you're a bit muted there, Greg.
Yes, I'm sorry.
There you go. Oh, you're right.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to be Nostradamus to predict that mental health issues for youth would be on the increase after the last few years and all of the interruptions to life in general. So it's a shame that it has to get to the point where it becomes a political football. There's a focus on a deficit, and then everybody wants to fill and do something. It should just be a normal mechanism of how we supply services to our youth. Anyway, in our communities.
Yeah, Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's that one. Let's look at aged care. Another question from one of the viewers here. What is your party's view on aged care wages, workforce shortages, and an increasing aging population? So obviously it's a big issue there. So maybe try and distill that down into what you think are the main issues. But certainly wages seems to be a problem here, keeping the workforce engaged, I suppose. Okay, let's talk to Tony Hickey first about that, if you would. Tony, where are you? I think he might have gone there. Okay, well, look, let's just move on. Susan, could you give us your views on this, aged care, wages, workforce shortages, and an increasing ageing population?
Labor has made a big commitment to improve the aged care system with advocating for a pay rise for aged care workers. We would put in a submission to the Fair Work Commission, arguing that there is a real need to increase the wages. We will also ensure that there's a nurse in every aged care centre 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This will actually have savings to the hospital system because people won't need to be transferred out as often. We want to see 215 minutes of care for every person living in aged care. These are all recommendations of the Royal Commission. The government has had the opportunity to act on them and hasn't. Yeah. We also want to see the food quality improved and greater transparency and accountability.
Thank you, that's good. Tony Pettit, what would you do about aged care? What do you think about it?
Look, I've seen quite varying levels of aged care, and they seem to go from one extreme to the other. We need to have some sort of minimum requirement for aged care, and the people that are looking after them and the care that those people get be consistent right across all aged care facilities.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. Sarah, what's your view about the aged care situation?
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a lot of elements to your question there that you want me to pack into 30 seconds.
I know.
However, look, it's no secret that the federal government is, of course, responding to all 148 recommendations through the, I'm so sorry about my voice, it's just not me, Aged Care Royal Commission. The first year of the 5-year $18.8 billion response has been completed. And that, of course, has had important changes, not just in aged care, residential, but of course in home care. Now, there's a lot to be done. The government themselves can't promise the wage increase. That has to be done through the Fair Work Commission, as was touched on before. But I think that people need to stop thinking that Labor is just the answer to aged care. The Liberal Party has delivered significant funding over the term that they have been in government. And of course, should I be elected as the MP in just a few days' time, it's something that's a top priority for me, with friends and family members, of course, in that system. And we need to be ensure, as people are living longer, we are looking after them as best as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Greg, could you give us your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, just quickly, Tony, being someone approaching a position that may need aged care sooner than later, I've got a very personal interest. Welcome the findings of the Commission, and a little bit frustrated about the untimely rollout of reaction to those recommendations. We saw a lot of problems during the COVID lockdown, and people were compromised in aged care. And we need to attract good quality people to it, and there needs to be a wage rise to do that.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, folks, can I just ask all of you, are you happy to do another couple of questions each? Is that okay?
I'm happy to, Tony, but if I drop out, it's my battery. When I left home this morning, I didn't bring my charger. So
fair enough. Fair enough. We've already lost one of our folks anyway, Tony Hickey. So we'll see how we go. Look, we'll keep them to 30 seconds. What is your view on the course cancellations and possible closure of Richmond TAFE, especially since federal government is responsible for legislation and apprenticeships? Susan, could I ask you first about that, please?
I brought to everyone's attention the state government's moves to close the equine courses there. I think it's a real tragedy that in an area where the equine industry is such a pillar of the economy, that we lose access to courses that, quite frankly, are designed to keep workers safe. I'm going to stop there because you can hear the building noise behind me.
That's all right, no problem. Tony, could you give us a quick take on this? This is about the equine, the horse courses being closed at Richmond TAFE, and also the bigger issue there that people believe it may lead on to. What do you think about it?
I think the decline in all tertiary or college type training, the hands-on stuff in all levels that I've seen in my life, that it's just close. And this is just another one on top of the heap.
Okay.
We need to stop the closing of the training of our young people.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Sarah, what do you think about this one? It's obviously a big local issue.
Yeah, it significantly was, and there were members of the community who expressed their hurt and their anger by those decisions, but predominantly it is a state decision to do that. And from what I have gathered on the situation, if courses are cut, sometimes those decisions are made by those tertiary bodies because of lack of enrolments. If there's more to this situation, then we of course can try and uncover that. But if there is also a lack of enrolments in that sphere, then I guess that educational facility needs to take into account whether it's still financially viable to put those courses on.
Okay, thank you. And Tony Hickey, sorry, Tony Hickey's gone, hasn't he? Greg, if you could give us a quick take on this.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. It shouldn't always come down to the ability for courses to pay for themselves. We can't continue to dismantle TAFE as we have done for so long. So totally against it.
Yep, fair enough. Okay. And so look, the last one I think for this evening, and obviously an important one for many people on environment. What will you do to mitigate climate change? Do you support the expansion of fossil fuels and coal mining? So I'll go back to the beginning here. I'll just do this as fairly as we can. So Susan, what do you think about that?
I just had noise at this end. Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No problem. What will you do to mitigate climate change? And do you support the expansion of fossil fuels and coal mining? I mean, I guess they're two separate things in some respects.
Okay, here's a go in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
We want to see a 43% reduction in emissions by 2030, and we have the plan to do that. That leads us to a pathway for reducing emissions to zero by 2050. We do that by rewiring the grid and making sure renewables, which are the energy of the future, can get into the grid. And that is why we're not going to see huge investment by any business in coal or fossil fuels, because they're all busting a gut to invest in renewables. There's more than $50 billion waiting there for a government to have an energy policy. And unfortunately, the 27 energy policies that the Morrison government has had just don't cut it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you. And Tony Pettit, can we ask you about this as well? What do you think about climate change?
Yeah, the climate changes all the time. We have 4 seasons every year, but also our planet goes through an 800 climate change in our solar system. The temperature goes up and down from the Ice Age 15,000 years ago to now. We're actually in a cooler period than they were back in the Egyptian days, when they had 3,000 years of hotter temperature than what we've got now.
So you're not really worried about it then?
No, I think it's just normal weather patterns.
Radio. Okay, fair enough. And Sarah, what's your position on this?
Yes, thank you. The coalition government came out towards the end of last year with their 2050 net zero emissions policy. And I think that was good for them to get that out on the table, so that the climate change debate didn't become just the sole issue of this federal election. And they set that out very clearly for the electorate to see. And I mean, I personally would be very scared under a Labor government, because not only are there targets there's questions around their targets, but will they be able to keep energy reliable and affordable while adjusting to that net zero 2050 target? I mean, that's up in the air because we've seen how they tried to manage things in those 6 years from 2007.
Okay, thank you. Greg, your sort of views on this?
Yes, climate change, very real, very scary. Animal Justice Party, you may be surprised, has the strongest climate change policies, to include methane from the intensive agricultural sector as well. What does concern me is this current government's love affair with fossil fuels and its $11.6 billion worth of subsidies this year. So there needs to be improvement on that.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thanks. I think we've just about got to the end of that then. So that's good. Look, thank you very much for that. Now, look, I just wanted to ask, are you willing, you candidates, to post answers to other questions that people might put on your candidates page? I think it means your candidates page. Oh, sorry, on the Meet the Candidates page. So basically questions that we've got, would you be happy to post answers to those if we put them on the site? Yeah. Okie doke, good stuff. Thank you very much. Look, thanks very much.
We can give it a go. We can give it a go, Tony.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. That's great. It's a busy time, obviously. So look, thank you ever so much for all being on here this evening and making it a great event. I think people have learned a fair bit about, what you will stand for, and I think that's the great purpose of it. So thank you again very much for your time.
Are we getting a wrap-up statement?
Well, yes, why not? Go for it. 30 seconds. 30 seconds on time.
Okay, there's some terrific things that I want to see in the Hawkesbury that we haven't mentioned, along with action to increase renewables and have electric vehicles. Things like an MRI license for Hawkesbury Hospital. There's an MRI machine going in there. We will give it a Medicare license so it's accessible. I want to see $2.5 million invested in North Richmond Community Centre to make it more suitable for evacuations and recovery. And I want to see Marana, our Marana Aboriginal Corporation, have an upgrade, just a small one, to make sure they can have medical professionals come and do health screening and private meetings in their centre. So there's just a few of the smaller local commitments that I'd like to see in the Hawkesbury. So if you vote for me, that's the outcome that we'll get if Labor wins government.
Excellent, that's good. And Sarah, what would you like to say as a bit of a wrap up there?
Thank you very much. Look, I think it's time for change here in the seat of Macquarie. It is time to have, obviously, a Liberal candidate, or I wouldn't be putting, Liberal MP, wouldn't be putting my hand up. Through this election, obviously, been able to make a certain amount of commitments, and of course, then additional commitments upon re-election of the coalition government. Something that I'm very proud to have done through this election period is $5 million towards a Veterans Wellbeing Centre at Skyville. And as everybody knows, I used to live on RAF Base Richmond and have grown up with a military family. So looking at veterans issues is important to me. Upon re-election of the coalition government, $1 million towards Dare Disability in Blaxland to do up one of the buildings there, to create another disability services centre for them. Money towards Cancer Wellness Centre in Lura, who delivers amazing services to people who are going through cancer. And of course, the big one that was this week, $11.2 million on Hawkesbury roads. And I think that everybody knows, after what we've been through, council just can't keep up with getting the work done, and they do need funding from other sources, and happy to have identified a few key roads to throw that money towards. And I do think, as I said, it's time for a change. There's been too much division over the last 6 years, too much negativity. It's time for positivity.
Okay, thank you, good stuff. Tony Pettit, give us your wrap up.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is a candidate that's going to represent the people in the Hawkesbury and therefore the whole of Australia and federal government. We need to make Australia great again. We need to have people in there who've got guts and determination, who don't have to follow the party line all the time, but stand up and be heard in Parliament and make their voice heard. If we don't change, we don't do something, we'll just keep on getting the same results all the time. So think about seriously where you put your vote. and make sure it's going to do something for this country, because we've got tough times ahead and we're going to have tough people in Parliament.
Thank you. Okay, Greg, if you could, we've only got a couple of minutes here now, so 30 seconds and then we'll be good.
Sure. Thanks, Tony. I can't promise any infrastructure projects or a new car for anybody that votes for us, but what I can promise is that if I vote for the AJP and then selecting your preference second, allocating your preferences, would send a message to government that we want better decision making, more compassion in government. We want the government to look after animals, people without a voice or who aren't represented, and the planet, and put all that together. So there is a position for us. We might be a single voice, but we'll be a loud and determined voice. So yeah, that's our goal.
That's excellent. Yeah, thank you. All right, look, folks, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time. I know it's a busy time, as I say. So thank you very much, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.